Welcome to the Tooth and Coin Podcast. This is Jonathan Van Horn, CPA. I am joined today with the infamous Dr. Deren Flesher. Dr. Darren is a guy that I've been connected with for many, many years. We've chatted back and forth about a lot of random topics over a long period of time. And as I stated on one of the first episodes of Tooth and Coin being relaunched, most of my content is self-hosted, but if there's an area where I don't feel like I'm the guy who knows the answers to things, I'm going to bring somebody on just to talk to them about what it is I don't know about. And I know Dr. Darren has done a lot of research into the area we're going to talk about today, which is alternative investments. I think of nobody better to bring on to give me an honest opinion. Since we've gone back so far, we've talked to each other about some kind of crazy things in the past, and we're going to be honest with each other. One of the things we've talked about in the past quite a bit is crypto, and we're closing in on $100,000 for Bitcoin today. So it's a very appropriate day for us to be talking with one of the things we've talked about in the past coming up. In my mind, Dr. Darren really encapsulates the entrepreneurial dentist. As a dental practice owner, he's sold practices before. He's gone into multiple other businesses. He's been an owner of Papa John's franchises. He's done a software startup and he's sold that software startup with Modento. He's actually in the middle of another software startup with Ordo. He's owned cannabis dispensaries. He's done a lot of different things in what seems like a pretty short amount of time. And there's not a lot of dentists that have done that, and even fewer dentists that have done that well. And he is now the founder of Legacy Point Group, which is a pretty cool group we've talked about in the past as well. That's the reason that we're bringing him on to talk today about our topic, which is alternative investments. So did I miss anything, Dr. Darren?
No, that was awesome. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's funny. We were talking just a couple weeks ago and Bitcoin was somewhere around, 65,000. And today it's 95,000. Like it's just a rocket ship in the last couple of weeks. It'll be fun to see where it goes for sure. But that's obviously not the main point I want to talk about. That's kind of our fun asides that we have conversations around crypto and altcoins and all the crazy stuff that's out there. But it's fun to see that stuff still going strong all these years later.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe we'll have another episode about crypto sometime where we'll just have an informal conversation about what it is and like the fun parts that go around with it. So cool. The one thing that I've held that's consistent that I feel like a lot of people miss in the business journey is, conceptually, it's not difficult to say, hey, I like Papa John's. I should go own a Papa John's franchise because I know that that could be a thing that I can make some money on. It's not a hard thing to think of. But it's a really hard thing to do. And a lot of the things that you've done are things that are hard to do. So what's your secret around this? I could be wrong, but you don't seem like you're a stressed out guy that's always worrying about the next thing, like running back and forth between all these crazy places and trying to make things happen. It seems like you're a pretty chill guy. What's your secret of doing those things?
Yeah. We're talking in the middle of the day on a weekday. So it's nice to have that flexibility when you are your own boss in whatever you're doing. I kind of have two superpowers, if you will, and I don't really consider them superpowers, but they're kind of what I think is unique to me. One is that I just don't get things naturally. I really have to think hard on them and for myself distill them down to like their easiest, simplest, digestible version, whether that's in my practice with systems or verbiage. I was a psychology major in undergrad. I don't know if we've talked about that before. So I think about what things mean and the order things happen and the meaning behind those things. And so that's one area where I feel like I succeed, is just making sure that I've simplified something and really made it to where a layman or somebody who doesn't have the degrees that I do when it comes to like my office or whatever can really implement. And then the other one I would say is just aligning with the people who are able to execute. I'm a dentist by training and a practicing clinician, but I know that I'm not the expert in most other things, whether it's accounting and taxes and running a different type of business. I feel like I have a little bit more insight to what that might take as a business owner myself, but I'm never going to go make pizza or, grow plants or whatever. Like I have to find those people. And fortunately, I found good operators and align myself with the people who can make those things happen. I'm there as an ideas guy, a sounding board to offer alternative views and play devil's advocate, but I'm not the one ultimately implementing the plan and making sure this thing succeeds.
In our traditional day jobs, which is being owners of service-based businesses, you in dentistry, me being a CPA firm, I feel like one of the hardest things to do is to find human capital, to find people that can help you execute on your vision as a business owner. That's one of the harder things to do. And I know a lot of them suffer from that as well. But you've not only seemed to be able to do that, you've also seemed to be able to do it in these other industries. Because again, conceptually, it's easy to say, I like Papa John's. Let me go buy some franchises and let me find another person that will go help me do this thing. But finding the other person, to me, that's the hard part. I know it hasn't probably been effortlessly, but it seems like you found these people to do these things. Like you talked about cannabis dispensary and things like that and the software side of things. How are you finding these other people that, number one, are like actually going to be able to do the things that they say they're going to be able to do? And number two, that like actually can execute on those things. Because again, conceptually, it's easy to say, hey, I'm in dentistry. I'm going to try and solve some of the problems that I'm facing. And I'm going to create this new software. Let me go find a person that can help me do this, and I'll tell them what I need and they'll help create it. But actually doing things, and this is coming from my own personal failures. And I think we've spoken about this in the past. I've invested something like $250,000 in like different software apps I've tried to create to help with the CPA side of things and like bridging the gap between industry. And they've all kind of fallen flat on their face because I've not been able to find those people that can execute on those visions. So how has that worked for you, and how have you been able to make that happen?
I want to make sure I say a couple things on that. One is, you're telling the success story and that part of the story, and that's all true. That doesn't mean there weren't issues or failures or firings along the way. Specifically on the software side, my journey there really came from a place of seeing a lot of different products out there, but none of them were exactly what I wanted them to be. And I could either live with what was out there. I could give my ideas to somebody who's already operating and hope they implement them for no value to me other than having a software that I liked to use. Or I could go try to build it, but I knew that I'd have to build the base of what already exists to add on my things that I wanted to be different. So to that end, I just literally put it out there in different dental Facebook groups and said, hey, has anybody got developers, anybody that they've worked with? I think I got 3 recommendations. I vetted them as best I could without giving away what I was doing. Chose one, went for 3 or 4 months. They were not able to deliver on what I was doing. So that was a little bit of a sunk cost, but I moved on from them, went back to my number 2 backup choice, and they'd actually shut down their kind of freelance business and were doing something similar to what I wanted to do. When we signed NDAs and had an open conversation, we realized we would make good partners on this versus me hiring them. And so that's what we ended up doing, is partnering together to build this thing. They had already barely started it. I think they had 8 offices that were owned by one guy under contract to work with them. We grew that from 8 to something like 2,000 over the next 3 years. So it wasn't all success, and I could have easily just stuck with that one guy and bled money forever and not gotten anywhere. And maybe my partners ended up building something awesome and I wouldn't have been a part of that. So I think part of it is, in whatever industry, we talk about hiring slowly and firing quickly. So in that instance, I hired a little bit quickly, which is how I ended up in a bad spot, but I also fired quickly, moved back to the people that I found out could do what I needed them to do, and got where I wanted to go on that. I hope that answers the question of how do you find people. It's just being willing to put yourself out there a little bit.
Yeah. Like you said about the success, it's easier to skip over the failure parts. Also, when you say like, yeah, I decided that person didn't work with me, and so I went to somebody else. That's not an easy thing to do sometimes, to say, hey, this person isn't working out. We've all been stuck. I don't know if it's like the sunk cost fallacy of like, hey, I'm stuck with this person. I've already invested this time with this person and I've given them the vision. I've given them the money on it. How do you have the guts to say, hey, this one's not working out? It's very rarely binary of like, it is working or it is not working. It is usually a shade of in between of like, it's kind of working, but is it not working enough for me to like just cut loose and go with somebody else?
Yeah, honestly, obviously something's inherent, but it's also part of being a dental practice owner for now a decade. I've had so much turnover. I did a startup practice. So the people you hire initially, they are serving a particular role at a particular time, but the practice grows and evolves. And some of those people aren't the right fit at that point. And either they self-select or you realize that they aren't going to grow with you. They're just not able to adapt to change and grow with what you need the practice to be. So having now about a 12-person team on any given day with 2 doctors in my office. But over the course of time, I bet I've employed 60 different people in that practice just over the decade we've been in it. There's a lot of experiences there where you realize after the fact that somebody was worse than you knew and you were giving them the benefit of the doubt. And then everybody comes out of the woodwork and tells you the things you wish you'd have known 6 months ago and you made a different decision. So I think it just kind of comes with experience, but there's obviously a little bit of intuition and just being willing to, like you said, move on from the sunk cost and get where you need to go that I lean on and am able to execute. I don't know that there's anything super teachable there other than I think just having more reps of doing the thing is going to get you better at what you're doing as far as understanding who's able to actually execute on what they've said they could do, whether it's an administrative assistant at your office at the front desk or somebody who's trying to develop a software or start a business with, the more you see, the more you realize what real ability and experience and knowledge looks like. And the more you realize some people are just good on paper or great in an interview. And then when it comes to actually doing the thing, they can't do it. I think it just comes with more reps, to be honest.
So I hear what you're saying there. The thing that I question, and I know that is in a lot of listeners' minds right now, because I talk to dentists all the time that feel this way, is they almost feel like they're, I don't want to say held hostage, but for lack of a better word, it's like, well, if I get rid of that front office person, it's so hard to find a front office person. I'm better with the devil that I know than the one that I don't, right? Burned hands worth two in the bush. It sounds like you're not afraid of the reps. And I think that a lot of dentists are afraid of the reps. And so that's an interesting perspective to hear on that.
Yeah, we've made conscious decisions multiple times through the years in my practice to be purposely short-staffed with good people versus being properly staffed with people who are not the right fit. And I'm literally today, as we're talking, in one of those phases where we are short-staffed. I'm waiting, I'm patient. We're still functional. We're treading water. We're not super profitable in this moment, but we can be patient and make sure that we find the right person rather than plugging that hole with somebody who's also not a good fit. And you don't realize sometimes in the moment, you do realize some things about the people, like they got weird verbiage, they're not selling treatment, whatever the case is. You don't realize some of the behind the scenes damage, like those families are now posting on their neighborhood Facebook page, and now the word's out to the whole community about this weird experience at your office or somebody who's inappropriate or awkward or whatever. And so you saw that one interaction and you made a judgment on it, and you know that it's not going to work for you in your office long term. But you don't realize the ripple effects and downstream effects that are happening by keeping somebody around who's not the right fit, whether it's a doctor who's super aggressive or rough, or like I said, somebody up front who's not really capable or whatever. It's pretty far reaching sometimes. And so the cost of keeping them there is often way more than the cost of letting them go and moving on and moving forward with the people who are a good fit, even if it doesn't at capacity get you where you want to go.
The other thing that I find really fascinating is most of the people that I know are dentists, but everybody feels like they're so busy nowadays. You're talking to me on a Thursday mid-morning and you're saying that you're understaffed currently, as well as you've got all these other things going on that most dentists don't have going on, but you've accepted the fact that you have less staff than you need. Whereas I think most people, even if they didn't have all the extra stuff that you've got going on, would be terrified of that mindset. So how do you do that? How do you balance the busyness of all these other things that you're doing with that concept that almost feels like it doesn't fit into the formula in my head of how it should go?
Yeah. For me, I like to have lots of plates spinning because I feel like a lot of things need to kind of marinate and take a minute to really get where they need to go, whether it's placing an ad, having a conversation with somebody, giving them a couple days to think on it and get back to you. If that's literally the only thing you have going on, you get impatient. It can be overwhelming. You feel like you're drowning, where I've got multiple other things going on. And so I inherently get distracted and give it the time it needs to have a proper kind of cadence on the response and all that. It's almost like a welcome distraction to have other things. And I'm not saying that I ignore the things that are most meaningful, but it's nice to have something else to fill the void where some people would just kind of be down and overwhelmed. I have something else I could go work on that might feel a little bit like busy work, but it does fill that gap between when I should have been waiting on somebody versus pestering them or getting in my feels about what's going on at the office or whatever. And like I said, I'm now in this for a decade, so I have a little more perspective and patience when it comes to this stuff, but it is nice to have other things to do as well to kind of have forced patience in addition.
I did an episode a couple episodes back about strategic management and employees and like looking at your vision, mission, and values and creating expectations and having accountability and all those types of things. Do you use any type of those types of traditional like strategic management structures to like analyze your people as they're coming through? Because again, it's really easy for us to say, hey, that person isn't working out in the rearview mirror, but in the moment you're like, maybe they'll get better. Or maybe it's me having an improper expectation. Maybe it was just a bad day. Maybe it was this or whatever it was. And having a decade of experience now, do you just know of like, hey, this person's a good one or not a good one? And so like, hey, I don't think this is going to work out. Let's go and start the recruitment process all over again. Or how much do you invest in training that person? Because that's another thing that kind of goes through a lot of people's heads when they got team members on. It's like, maybe I'm not doing a good enough job of training this person currently. And that's the reason that they're not able to answer the phone in the right number of rings, or they're not kind enough, or maybe they don't know those types of things. What are your thoughts on that? Do you use any type of structure for that? Is there any type of cadence when you think about these things? Or is it more like you like to have a bunch of plates spinning, so you'll just move to that plate every once in a while? I was like, oh, the plate of like my admin people just aren't good enough right now. I'm just going to replace them. Or maybe they need new tools or training, whatever it may be.
A little bit of both. The tools and the training side of it, we've got great systems, documents, examples in the office, whether it's recordings or people who are already there doing it well. And so we get a feel pretty early on when somebody's new on, are they receptive? Are they picking this up? Are they asking additional questions that seem like they are grasping the previous concept and moving forward versus being stuck in the mud and not getting it? We have all that in place. As far as hiring, even taking a step back from there, I've got a little bit of a process. It's been a little bit less effective over the last few years with COVID and less applicants, but we've got a way that I place the ad, a way that people are supposed to respond. It kind of tells me, can they follow instructions? I have a little survey that I ask them to take. It gives me some information. It tells me how they talk to people and about other people. So there are reasons for what I do that seem just kind of like this is just another thing that he's doing. Like I said, I'm a psychology major, so I'm kind of thinking about what is the why and the how behind what's going on here that gives me more information on this person. Are they going to be the right personality, the right mindset for what we're trying to ask them to do when they become an employee here? And then, like I said, we've got all the tools and softwares and training videos and documents and all that. So we'd like to have them sit with somebody and learn, but ultimately we've got other things we can say, hey, go look at this or watch this video if they're in the middle of doing their actual job and don't have the time to train them. So a little bit of both. And then, like I said, it's just kind of in me as far as intuition and understanding of personalities and the way they're going to mesh and vibe with the team. There are some systems that ultimately require my interpretation, I guess is the best way to say it.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, it doesn't always come up as being a yes or no sometimes. Sometimes it comes down to just, hey, I just know this person's probably not going to be a long-term working out. The simple way that I tell people to try and like turn it into a binary question is, if you wave a magic wand and tomorrow comes and this person's not employed there, but you have the position open, would you hire that person again? And if it's not a yes, then it's a, hey, I need to make a change, basically. That's as simplified as I can usually make it, but there's a lot more that usually goes into it too. In terms of managing those team members, let's move that into finding other people that are operators of business, because finding a team member, while there is like some type of implicit partnership there where they're going to provide you with some type of service for the funds that you're paying them, some wages, when you're partnering with someone, it's a whole different dynamic. And you mentioned it whenever you had the software person before, you said, hey, this isn't working. I imagine that was somewhat similar to the thoughts you have with your current employees. I would think that was probably harder to make that decision because of the fact that you don't have the experience being a software company at that time, but you still were able to make that decision. Is there anything that led you to that? Was it just an obvious it's not working out type of thing? Like you're telling them to do something and all you're getting back is like an Excel spreadsheet or something like that? Or was it something else?
Yeah, that was pretty obvious. I mean, we had competitor examples that we were trying to be similar to or better than. And so there's UI and UX that was out there. And I'm like, hey, this needs to be this. And what was coming back to me was very just underwhelming as far as the product and the output that he was giving me, even without having any sort of background. That one was really obvious, unfortunately, or I guess fortunately for what ended up happening. But in the moment, it was unfortunate. I was just confused, to be honest, because the example products he showed me from previous partnerships or freelance jobs that he'd worked on were vastly different from what he showed me here. Anyway, it was a good thing, obviously, in retrospect, to be able to see pretty quickly that it wasn't going to go anywhere. And the relative loss was pretty low compared to where it could have gone long term if I'd have tried to stick with them or be patient or, some of the things that could have happened. So yeah, that was pretty obvious. Bigger picture as far as finding the right partner, I think having experience in that field is obviously super important. Like you said, is not just somebody who's got time and availability to go do the thing that you want to do. I'll give you, for instance, the Papa John's guy owned a local restaurant for a decade. And prior to that, before owning and managing his own private restaurant, he worked for the Yum Group, which is like Taco Bell and all that, and was like a regional manager for them. So he'd already been in franchise, kind of fast foodish type stuff, then went and did his own thing. Then he had the thought to go back and do more franchise type things and needed capital and needed a partner. He wanted somebody who was a business owner, who wasn't, giving him his last dollar, that needed it back tomorrow, those types of things. So I was a good partner in that way. I thought about business. I didn't understand pizza and franchising and learned a lot there, but I understood business. I understood employees. I understood the dynamics that go on there with scheduling and the logistics of all that. And so I was a good partner in that way. And then, like I said, I didn't need the money back anytime soon. I had a great thing going with my dental practice. So this was on the side, truly, as far as the financial part of it. So I wasn't down his throat or in his ear about, when's the distribution? When's this happening? So I got to be patient and he got to be patient. We got to pay off loans and get it to snowball and have a few locations before we really started to see profitability there. So that's how that worked out. And I'll give you one more piece of this and we can move on. I guess another thing that I feel like I'm pretty good at, even though I'm an introvert and I love having individual conversations like this, being on stage or in front of a large group is not my favorite thing, but I don't mind leading a small group of people or having conversations with people. So for him, I actually found him through a fantasy football league. It was my brother-in-law's league. All these people were restaurant people, waiters or managers or whatever. And obviously I just told you his story. My brother-in-law had waited tables at a nice steakhouse in his 20s in downtown Oklahoma City. And so these are all people that had connected in their younger years and stayed connected through this fantasy football league that they started. Obviously that wasn't me. That wasn't who I was, but there's a 10-person league and they always had one or two people just based on the types of people that were in the league that would oversleep or party it up the night before and be a no-show. And so they always had another one or two people that were on call to rotate in to become that 9th or 10th person. And I'd been on that on-call list for a couple of years. And one of the years in dental school, I obviously got the call and said, I'll be there in an hour. And I was. And because of who I am and how I'm wired, I never missed a draft. I was never the 9th or 10th guy anymore. So that spot got filled and held for a long time. But anyway, that's just kind of networking kind of organically through just saying yes to an opportunity. And it led to other things. When you're younger, I feel like when you've got more time than money, not necessarily saying yes to the entire concept and giving them cash or giving them too much of your time, but just being willing to explore things led me to a lot of different things, whether it was Modento or franchises or cannabis stuff. It was the same guy who led me to the cannabis stuff. And we had other partners over there that were operators. So you never know what's going to lead to something meaningful. Sometimes it could just be a fantasy football league and that's all it ever is. But just being willing to say yes and explore things led me to a lot of places.
So 2 questions to follow up on that. Number one, was there ever a time where you thought the Papa John's thing wouldn't work after you'd said yes to it? Was there a point where you thought like, hey, talking like that team member that you say you got to cut loose, was there ever a point in time where you're like, we're getting close to that point? Or was it always just, it just always kind of worked?
Honestly, because I was a little bit insulated from just understanding things quite as at the level that my partner did, there might have been more scary times than I even knew. We had check-ins regularly and I would give him my opinion on whatever was going on, or should we go start a new place or buy this other place that's struggling or whatever. A lot of those things didn't go anywhere, but it was a lot of just conversations. And in those were conversations about our own businesses. And we had the same struggles as I have in my own dental practice, where you have turnover and you've got maybe not the right fits, or they're not reliable, or not delivering good service or whatever. We talked through those specific items and how to maybe tackle them, but we never really got to the point of talking about like the business is doing poorly and going out of business or anything like that. Part of it was he was willing to roll up his sleeves and be the operator if needed. And he could literally run the whole store by himself if that's what it required. That wasn't obviously what we wanted or preferred, but he was capable of doing that. Sort of like a dentist, if they really wanted to, could probably learn everything in their dental practice and do it, but it's not the most efficient use of your time. That's kind of part of why he was the right fit for what we were doing. Is we had the kind of the ultimate backstop. It wasn't just 2 guys with capital and a great idea. It was like we had an actual operator that could go in and do the thing if that's what it required.
There's so many questions I could ask about that. I said before, I think that in a world of Shark Tank, in a world of like Marcus Lemonis and all those types of things where you see like Bar Rescue, where the guy goes in and talks to Bar, and all those fun stories where you think about business and you're like, oh yeah, all you have to do is this. It seems almost like, I don't have a better word for it, but like a cool fantasy, like utilize the capital that I've done or I've acquired as through my other professions or whatever it may be, then I could help with the things I've learned with these other things. It's really cool that you've been able to do that, because again, we help 400 offices. There's very, very few percentage of our clients that have successes outside of dentistry in one industry, and the food industry and, the cannabis industry, and then software as a service as well. It's really cool that you've got these stories. Thanks for tuning in to the Tooth and Coin podcast. If you found value in today's episode, please share it with a fellow dentist or a practice owner who could benefit. Your word of mouth helps us spread financial wisdom throughout the dental community. So until next time, keep building that thriving practice.